The cry is small, but it cleaves the room, and Ethan's breath jerks like a stalled engine as Nurse Chen whispers a name that does not belong here. He stares at the bassinet like it's a verdict written in swaddled cotton. Judge Wallace's voice returns in a memory that still stings. The child bears his blood, and the courtroom gasps again in his skull. Lila will not meet his eyes in that replay, and the clock on the wall turns cruel. Ethan said, "This is a mistake," but the word shatters on tile. The nurse says the test is conclusive, and the hallway tilts. He remembers the envelope, the stamp of certainty, the way friends stepped back like he was contagious. He wants to run, but his feet glue to the floor. He reaches for the bassinet and stops, shaking at the wrist as if touching would sign a contract. Somewhere, a door closes, and the sound is final. "What am I supposed to do?" he mutters, and the answer is everywhere and nowhere at once. The room smells like antiseptic and overboiled coffee, and Ethan hates that he notices the coffee first. He said, "Tell me again," and Nurse Chen repeats it with the patience of a saint. The test is not a rumor. The result is not a headline that fades. He walks to the window and sees his reflection split by the mullion. Lila once said, "You always think you can fix things," and the words return like a bruise. He wants someone to tell him what a good man does when the map is burned. The baby hiccups, and the sound cuts his thoughts clean. He feels a tug in his chest he cannot label without surrender. He thinks of bills, of silence at dinner, of friends who vanish when things get messy. He turns back and says, "What's her name?" even though the name already rings. The city outside is loud, but inside the room it is the hush before a promise. He remembers the hallway to the courtroom where the floor sounded like hollow drums. A bailiff nodded and never met his eyes. Lila stood near the bench, spine iron, mouth locked in a line that dared him to speak. Ethan said, "If this is true, then say it plain." And the air thinned around the words. Papers slid across polished wood like blades. The judge did not look cruel, only tired, which felt worse. Someone coughed, and it echoed like a gunshot. The test packet lay between them, small and enormous. Lila blinked and a single tear changed nothing. Ethan thought of the night they almost reconciled, of a number he never dialed again. Truth does not ask if you are ready. It arrives with stamps and signatures. Back in the hospital, Ethan washes his hands like guilt is a stain that will finally lift. Water runs hot, and he lets it scald. He said, "I don't know how to be this," and the mirror shows the same man who once thought love was enough. The sink sputters, and a drip keeps time with his heartbeat. He thinks of his father's silence, a legacy of doors that never reopen. He thinks of a small apartment where laughter might echo if he lets it. He hears shoes in the hall and expects judgment, but it is only a cart rattling past. He dries his hands too hard and the towel tears. He steadies his breath, counts to 4, then to 8. He decides to walk back to the bassinet before doubt rebuilds its walls. The bassinet is closer than he remembers, or maybe he is finally willing to cross the space. He said, "Hi," and the word feels foolish and brave. The baby shifts, small and stubborn, a universe packed into 6 pounds. He thinks of Lila's quiet strength and the sharp edges that cut them both. He thinks of Maria, who once told him that family is the choice you repeat when it hurts. The clock ticks, and for once it does not accuse him. He places a hand on the rail and does not pull back. He whispers, "If you need me, I will learn," and the vow surprises him. The room breathes with him, a little slower, a little safer. Somewhere down the corridor, a laugh rises and fades like a promise. Morning settles like a fragile truce, and Ethan stands between the bassinet and the window, as if choosing which world to face first. Nurse Chen said, "Breathe before you decide anything," and the words land without pressure. He wants to say he is not built for this, but truth has already signed its name across his chest. He studies the tiny curls on the blanket and hears a scrape in his memory that sounds like a door closing long ago. Ethan said, "If I touch her, I can't be who I was yesterday, and the room holds its breath with him. Nurse Chen nods and does not move closer, like a guard who understands mercy. Shame prowls and tells him he will fail, yet the small rise of a sleeping chest argues otherwise. He said, I'm scared of the cost, and fear answers with silence that feels like a ledger. The window hums with city noise, steady and indifferent. He lifts his hand and lets it hover above a future that refuses to wait. He escapes to the quiet lounge and finds an old vending machine humming like a tired choir. The taste of coins and coffee drags him backward to the apartment where silence outlived laughter. Ethan said, You left before I learned how to stay, and the sentence aims at a father who is not here. The machine clunks, and the paper cup shivers, as if it knows a confession is heavier than steam. He remembers a folded note that promised he would understand one day. And that day never arrived. He said, If I carry her, I carry every broken thing I swore to outrun. And the words do not echo. The floor is waxed to a shine that reflects his shoes, but not his face. He tries to picture a bedtime without a disappearing act. The picture flickers, then steadies. He returns to the corridor with coffee cooling, and a new ache that feels suspiciously like purpose. Maria arrives with the soft thunder of friendship that has survived worse seasons. She does not hug him first, she reads his face like a map with landslides. Maria said, You keep trying to win at not needing anyone. And the sentence lands warmer than it sounds. He wants to argue, but truth is already sitting between them with folded hands. The cafeteria hums with trays and stories that will end better than his, if he lets them. Ethan said, If I choose her, I lose the life I built, and Maria smiles without joy. She said, Or you trade it for the life you meant to build, and the room tilts toward the possibility. He stares at a sugar packet he does not open. He pictures a night where crying is not a failure, but a language. The thought frightens him less than it did an hour ago. He steps into the stairwell and calls Lila, because avoiding her has only grown the storm. The ring feels like a wick burning down. Lila answers with a voice that has armor in every syllable. Ethan said, I am not asking for forgiveness, and the stairwell swallows the echo. She said, Then what do you want? And the question digs like a key that could open or scratch. He wants to say he wants a chance, but the wish tastes fragile. He said, I want her to be more than a verdict, and the metal railing cools his grip. Lila breathes, and the pause sounds like rain behind a shut window. She said, Do right by her even if it is not with me, and the words sting and soothe in equal measure. The call ends without applause. He pockets the phone and stares at concrete that has learned the weight of many choices. He returns to the room and the hush meets him like a promise that will not sign itself. Nurse Chen is charting and pretends not to watch. Ethan said, I don't know the steps, but I can learn the rhythm, and the sentence steadies him as it leaves. The baby yawns and the world narrows to a small miracle, with fists the size of second chances. He imagines first baths and first falls, and the first time someone says she looks like him. Fear uncoils but does not vanish. He said, I will show up even when I am late, and I will be less late each time. And the vow surprises him again. The window offers a thin sun like a blessing that is shy. Nurse Chen said, Write it down so you cannot pretend you never said it, and he nods. He takes a pen and writes only 2 words on a wristband he will not throw away. He stays. Evening leans against Ruth's small kitchen, and the clock tattles with every tick. Ethan said, I came because hiding makes it worse, and his voice carries the weight of late springs. Ruth wipes a clean counter like she can erase the news. She said, Our family survived by stepping around fires, and her hands do not stop moving. He wants to say that stepping around is how the house burned down. Maria said, He is not asking for blessing, just a place to breathe, and the room cools a degree. Ruth looks at the back door as if an exit might answer for her. Ethan said, I will not run the way he did, and silence sits like a judge no one elected. The kettle clicks off and no one pours the water. Ruth said, A baby rewrites every debt, and the sentence is not a threat, but it stings. He nods because the math is honest even when it hurts. He said, I will pay with presents, and the promise steadies his breath. Ruth sets one mug down, then another, and the third waits like a test. The social services office smells like dry paper and anxious plans. Jordan slides a checklist across the table as if it is a bridge he must build midair. Jordan said, who will help at night? And the question lands without accusation. Ethan said, I will learn the hours and fail less each week. And the truth sounds bare. Lila sits angled away, armor stitched into her posture. She said, he thinks promises are furniture, and the line is sharp from practice. Maria said, he is here now, and now is where futures start, and the fluorescent light flickers and steadies. Ethan lists names and hours and rent, due on Friday. He does not list shame, though it breathes beside him. Jordan said, the child needs a reliable map, and he nods because maps are better than bravado. Lila's eyes glint like winter streets. Ethan said, I will show up even when the map is wrong, and his pen stops shaking. The office buzzes with the kind of quiet that gossips best. Mr. Kincaid calls him in and gestures at a chair that feels like a warning. Mr. Kincaid said, we need stability, not headlines. And the blinds cut the light into bars. Ethan swallows the urge to explain a life no memo can hold. He said, my work will stand even while my life learns to walk, and his hands anchor to his knees. Alex waits outside and pretends to text. Tessa waves without waving, a motion small enough to vanish. Mr. Kincaid said, take unpaid time if you must, but do not bring the storm here. And the words land like sandbags. Ethan signs the form because storms do not ask for permission. Hey, whip. He steps out and Alex looks away. Tessa says nothing and means everything. He walks to his desk and packs only what he needs to keep the lights on at home. In the grocery lot, the air smells like rain and cut oranges. Mrs. Davenport wedges her cart between him and the door like a sermon on wheels. She said, some babies need quiet homes, not chaos, and the words wear nice perfume. Maria steps closer and does not reach for his arm. Ethan said, quiet is not the same as safe, and the wind shuffles receipts at their feet. Mrs. Davenport tilts her head as if disappointment is a crown. She said, then prove you are more than a headline. And the challenge gleams. He wants to argue, but proof is not a speech. He said, I will prove it by showing up tomorrow, and the day after, and the line holds steady. Maria said, he is already in the arena, and the cart finally moves. The automatic doors open like breath he forgot to take. He walks inside and chooses diapers he cannot yet afford. The letter arrives with the kind of font that never smiles. Lila's lawyer requests a plan with boxes for money and hours and proof of walls that will hold. Ethan said, I do not have all of that yet, and the apartment answers with thin silence. He spreads bills like a deck stacked against him. Maria said, we will make a list and kill it line by line, and the pen scratches like a match. He calls the landlord and asks about a safer lock. He messages Alex and Tessa and does not wait for replies. He builds a budget that leaves no room for failure and makes peace with small meals. Lila texts, I will not let her be a lesson you learn too late, and the screen glows cold. He writes, I will bring proof by Friday, and hits send before doubt wakes. The room feels smaller but steadier, like a ship that knows its weight. Night folds around Ruth's living room like a curtain that refuses to lift. A shoebox sits on the coffee table, and the cardboard smells like wet attic dust. Ruth said, you were never supposed to know, and her hands do not leave the lid. Ethan said, secrets already spent our inheritance, and the lamp hums like a guilty witness. Maria stands quiet, guarding the air from breaking. Ruth opens the box and slides out a photo of Daniel with a hospital band that bears their last name. She said, he asked me for help and I helped the wrong way, and the words buckle. Ethan tastes metal where the truth bites down. He said, Tell me everything before I make promises I cannot keep. And the clock answers with a slow tick. Ruth nods and begins with a date that cuts the room in half. The night leans closer, hungry for names and receipts. The cafe is almost empty, and a neon open sign blinks like a heartbeat that cannot decide. Lila sits with her back to the door, and a cup she will not drink. Ethan said, I need the truth without polishing, and the rain threads the window. Lila stares at the spoon and sees a different kitchen, a different winter. She said, I was scared of starting over hungry, and the line lands without pity. He waits, because hurrying has never made a confession cleaner. Lila said, Daniel was a storm I mistook for weather. And the spoon stops shaking. She lifts her eyes like surrender. She said, that child isn't yours. That child is his. And the neon stops blinking in his chest. Ethan's breath arrives late and sharp. He said, you aimed me at the fire and called it shelter, and the silence burns slow. The roof drum beats a verdict no one ordered. Jordan meets them in a small conference room that smells like new carpet and old arguments. A folder sits centered like a referee. Jordan said, the chain of custody has gaps, and her pen draws a square around a date. Ethan said, so, the certainty was costume, and the chair creaks under a weight he did not bring. Lila watches the corner of the table, as if it might collapse. Jordan said, we redo the test at the hospital lab under supervision, and she slides a consent form that does not shake. Maria said, let the answer be clean, even if it cuts, and the fluorescent lights soften. Ethan signs and hears the scratch like a match. He said, I will stand where I can see the labels, and Jordan nods as if that vow belongs on the form. The room exhales when the folder clicks shut. Outside, the corridor carries other futures past their door. The church basement smells like lemon cleaner and apologies that took too long. Folding chairs stand in a shy circle, and no one else is here. Ruth said, I told her to put your name on the petition because a stable name buys time, and the confession shakes free. Ethan walks the room once and stops where a water stain looks like a map. He said, time is not a crib, and the echo lands hard. Ruth said, Daniel was using again, and I thought if I could hold the storm, it might pass, and the fluorescent buzzes like a fly. He hears the 12 steps on a poster he never read. He said, you traded my life to hide his, and the sentence finds a target. Ruth folds into a chair as if one more secret would break the metal. She said, I thought I was saving a child, and the sentence sinks. The basement keeps every whisper like a ledger. The lab draws blood in a room that pretends to be calm. Ethan watches each vial like a witness under oath. Lila said, I will face whatever this says, and her voice is paper that refuses to tear. Jordan labels slowly, speaking each name as if it were a spell that keeps disasters apart. Maria said, truth is a floor, not a cliff, and the nurse smiles at the phrasing. Ethan said, if the result moves me out of the story, I will not move out of her life, and the vow steadies his hands. The baby sleeps in a carrier, oblivious to juries and ink. Ruth waits in the hall with a rosary of guilt and hope she cannot sort. The bandages press tiny circles on skin that will heal faster than trust. The door closes on a room where labels finally match their bottles, and the future pauses before choosing a direction. Morning settles over the courthouse like a sheet pulled too tight. Ethan stands when the clerk calls his name, knees feeling newly made. Lila sits 2 chairs away, a white knuckle locked around a pen. Jordan said, the lab certified the chain, and sets the folder down. Ruth stares at the seal as if faith might change wax. Judge Wallace said, we will hear facts before feelings, and quiet falls. Ethan thinks of the bassinet and the vow on a cheap wristband. He said, whatever the paper says, I will not disappear, and holds. Lila said, then hear the paper. And her voice is winter on stone. The clerk breaks the envelope and slides out truth that smells of toner. Maria anchors him by standing still where he can see her eyes. The judge lifts his glasses like a shield, and the day tilts toward a cliff. The report sketches alleys like constellations, and every star points to Daniel. Judge Wallace said, "Biological father identified," and the words drop like iron. The bailiff opens the side door, and Daniel steps in with swagger and tremor. Daniel said, "I can do right now," and the claim wobbles on one leg. Ethan does not sit, because sitting feels like surrender. He said, "First in blood is not first to arrive," and the room stiffens. Lila watches her hands and rescues no one. Jordan said, "We ask for a safety plan and supervised contact." Daniel laughs once and swallows the sound like a bad pill. Maria said, "The child needs boring love that never cancels," and wood softens. Ethan said, "I will stand until told otherwise," and pride stays leashed. The judge taps the file once, and silence waits for a decision. Recess empties the room into a hallway that smells of dust and rain. Daniel leans on the fountain and smirks like a habit he never shed. Daniel said, "You playing hero for points," and the words scratch. Ethan said, "I am here for diapers and midnights, not applause," and the smirk falters. Lila stands between them, without touching either man. She said, "I want her safe, even if that ruins me in stories," and the echo shakes. Daniel said, "I can clean up," and his hands refuse to be still. Maria said, "Clean first, then claim," and truth lands like a slap. Ruth steps close enough to be heard and far enough to feel ashamed. Ruth said, "I made this worse by hiding you," and Daniel looks away. The bailiff measures distance more than words and stays quiet. The clerk calls them back, and every footstep writes a decision. They return to rows that feel like pews for a faith they doubt. Judge Wallace said, "I have read enough promises to wallpaper this building." Jordan presents a plan with tests, visits, and a calendar that punishes drift. Daniel said, "You do not cage a father," and the bench does not react. Ethan said, "Cages hold lions, schedules hold love," and the line lands. Lila said, "I will follow the plan if it follows her safety," voice steady. Ruth whispers, "Let her inherit fewer secrets," and stares at the floor. Maria passes Ethan a list that looks like a road, not a wall. Jordan said, "Temporary guardianship stays with current caregiver during compliance." The judge weighs words like bricks and watches who bends. The clock kisses the hour, and no one breathes. A cry filters from the corridor, and all the paper feels thin. The ruling lands without thunder, which makes it louder. Judge Wallace said, "The child remains with her mother under a safety plan." He adds, "Supervised contact for Daniel. Compliance with testing and classes is required." He adds, "Mr. Cole is approved as designated support caregiver under oversight." Daniel exhales like a tire losing air and studies the floor. Lila presses the pen so hard the form almost tears. Ethan said, "I will be there when the schedule calls, and when fear calls louder." Maria makes a small check beside the first task, turning dread into plan. Ruth weeps into a quiet that does not punish her. Jordan gathers the papers and said, "Today we begin the boring heroism," brief smile. The gavel falls once, and the room folds into motion. Ethan leaves with empty arms and a fuller name for love. Evening slides into the apartment like a careful guest, and Ethan clears a corner for a crib that still smells like cardboard. Maria said, "Make space for the life you chose," and she folds tiny clothes with battlefield calm. He shakes an Allen key like it might sing the right order of bolts. Lila texts a schedule change and thanks him for picking up the late feed. He said, "I will cover the hours no one wants." And the room answers with a soft hum. The landlord fixes the lock and nods without opinion, then leaves them to the quiet math of parts and patience. Maria said, "You are building a room where excuses cannot sleep." And he almost smiles. He lines diapers in a row like chess pieces that finally obey rules. He prints the safety plan and tapes it near the light switch where panic will find it. Lila said, "Send a photo when you are done," and he hears weariness carry a small faith. He said, "It will not be pretty, but it will hold," and the crib clicks into certainty. The city murmurs under the window, while a new name for ordinary begins to form. The family center smells like crayons and nerves, and the clock favors no one. Jordan said, "We keep boundaries clear and simple," and lays out the toys like markers on a map. Lila arrives first, carrying an exhaustion that tries to hide. Daniel follows with hands in his pockets like apologies he cannot spend. Ethan said, "I will sit where you need me," and chooses a chair that faces the whole room. Jordan said 2 hours, structured with me present, and the rules settle like rain. Lila lifts hope and breathes once, then once more, before passing her to the center of the circle. Daniel said, "Hey little comet," and the nickname stumbles but does not fall. Ethan watches for grip, for heat, for any tremor that means stop. Maria said, "If anyone forgets the plan, I will remember it for us," and relief stands up straighter. The timer starts, and the afternoon learns a new honesty that does not shout. The walls carry finger paintings that promise better endings, and no one trusts them yet. Ethan said, "We can do small, we can do steady," and the circle holds. Night stretches thin and kind, and the apartment learns the hush of small hours. Maria dozes on the couch with a blanket crooked at one knee, refusing to abandon the watch. Ethan said, "Okay, we are both new at this," and the bottle warms like a sunrise no one sees. He times breaths with sips and finds a rhythm that is not elegant but true. From the phone, Lila texts, "Is she calm?" and he answers with a photo of a yawn mid-bloom. He said, "You can rest for a few hours, I have the next 3, and the promise does not tremble." The radiator clicks, the fridge hums, the city pauses between sirens, and the quiet stacks like bricks. He hums an off-key song his mother never taught him, and the room forgives the melody. Maria wakes just enough to murmur, "This is the boring heroism," and drifts again. Ethan said, "I will keep showing up until the habit becomes my name," and the words steady his hands. The night does not grant absolution, but it offers practice, and practice feels like grace. Morning breaks clean after a night of rain, and the park smells like leaves, trying again. Ruth waits on a bench with a small box wrapped in tissue, spine straight as penance. Ethan sits and lets the silence explain what words still bruise. Ruth said, "I taught you to survive, and forgot to teach you to trust." And her hands knot. He said, "I needed you to choose truth sooner," and the pigeons shuffle like jurors bored of guilt. Ruth opens the box and shows a blanket she has been knitting between apologies and prayers. She said, "It is uneven, like me," and tries to smile. He touches the stitch where a mistake repeats, and it looks like a trail that finds itself. He said, "Bring this to her, and stay where the plan says you can stand, and the boundary holds." Ruth nods and says, "I will not hide him or you again," and her voice steadies. They watch a stroller roll by with parents who do not know them, and the wind decides not to speak. Ethan breathes until the past loosens its grip a fraction. He said, "We begin with small visits and larger honesty, and the bench feels less like a witness." At the review meeting, the conference room smells like dry erase markers and coffee that forgives no one. Jordan said, "Compliance is strong, and visits have stayed within guardrails," and flips a page with care. Lila sits tall and tired, but her eyes have lost the frantic edge. Daniel signs the next test request without debate, and looks at the ceiling as if answers live there. Ethan said, "Keep the plan tight until trust quits wobbling, and the table holds steady." Maria records the new dates and adds reminders like breadcrumbs against drift. Jordan said, "We extend the schedule with incremental increases for consistency," and the room exhales. Lila said, "Thank you for showing up when cameras are not here," and the line lands soft. Daniel said, "I will not miss another Tuesday," and no one argues with the vow. Ethan said, "Whatever the title, I am her everyday helper," and he feels the words settle. The meeting ends without applause, which feels right, and the hallway outside smells almost like peace. Dawn clears the city like a conscience rinsed clean, and Ethan waits for the kettle to click before the day begins. The wristband with his vow sits beside the sink like a quiet witness. He said, "Today we practice again, and the words fit better than they used to." Lila knocks softly and steps in with a diaper bag and a steadier gaze. She said, "Thank you for last night," and the gratitude lands without armor. Maria texts a checklist and an unnecessary joke that still helps. Ethan laughs, small but real, and the room loosens. He said, "I will take the afternoon shift," and Lila nods like trust learning to walk. The city hums outside, indifferent, and that is a relief. He holds the bottle to the light, as if blessing it. The day opens like a door that will not slam, and he chooses to cross it without looking back. The park hosts a picnic that is more paperwork than blanket, and still it feels like grace. Jordan said, "Consistency is our victory speech," and checks boxes that used to scare them. Daniel arrives on time and sober, and his hello does not wobble. He said, "I am here to earn small hours," and the sentence holds. Lila watches the sky and lets a breath go that has waited too long. Ethan said, "We can share the weight without dropping her," and the words arrive steady. Maria spreads snacks like trophies for ordinary courage. Ruth sits at the edge, hands folded, choosing to witness rather than direct. The wind lifts a corner of the schedule, but no one loses the page. They stay until the sun folds into trees, and the plan still stands. Evening drifts into the visitation room with the timid courage of day 19. Daniel hands over a clean test and a schedule with ink that has not smudged. He said, "I'm not asking for a parade," and his voice chooses the floor over the ceiling. Lila nods and says, "Then keep arriving," and the line is simple and hard. Ethan said, "If you stumble, call before you vanish," and the warning wears no teeth. Jordan marks the calendar and says, "We review next month," as if months were bridges. Maria whispers, "Boring love wins," and the baby yawns on cue. Ruth wipes a tear like a signature she did not plan to write. Daniel holds the bag of diapers like a flag he is learning to carry. The room holds all of them without tipping. And for once, that is enough. Night in the apartment is kinder now, and routine fits like an old sweater someone finally mended. Ethan warms a bottle and hums off key without apology. He said, "I am here," and the statement no longer needs proof. The siren passes and keeps going, and the silence it leaves is generous. He texts Lila a photo and writes, "She is down," and the reply is a relieved "thank you" followed by nothing, which feels like trust. Maria checks the door and says, "Sleep in shifts," and he nods. He sets the wristband in the drawer where vows become habits. On the fridge, the plan holds with magnets shaped like stars. He said, "Tomorrow we do it again," and tomorrow seems willing. The window shows a city that will forget them, and that is a kind of mercy they can use. Morning finds him on the stoop with a stroller that still squeaks, and the city exhales steam like a blessing. Lila arrives with a tired smile and says, "Thank you for yesterday," and he answers, "Tomorrow too." Daniel texts a photo of a signed attendance card, and no one claps, they just keep walking. Ruth waves from across the street and does not cross, honoring an invisible line they drew together. Maria laughs at a pigeon that refuses to move, and the day lightens. Ethan watches a small hand grip his finger with quiet ferocity. He said, "I will not choose pride over parenthood," and the words settle like a key in a door. He leans close and whispers the line he will not outgrow. He said, "They may forget our names, but you will always know who I am."